on the loyalty side of the thing. Let's just wait and pray and see how things will change. Another angle, I think, in other places that would have been really very good in a democracy is participating in parties. Because parties really have become the conduits through which we recruit our political leadership. So if you want to make change, in many respects, if parties were democratic, deliberative bodies, policy-making bodies about ideas, a lot of people should be going through that. But our parties are not those. They are just election-winning machines that mobilize basically to win elections, and even their internal processes are not democratic. If you want to contest as a member of parliament, some of the criteria would say you have to show that you have nurtured the constituency. Do you understand what that means? Nurtured the constituency as a requirement for becoming a candidate in the party. It means you must have spent money in the preceding 4 years taking care of the party executives and the gatekeepers who are going to make it possible for you to become a candidate. Right? Now, how is that going to encourage many young people, many women, and people without means, but who have serious civic interest? How is that going to encourage them when you have a party system like that? It shuts out a lot of people. So that is not an avenue for them. And in fact, the running for office, as even an independent, Akoto Ampaw did that. He ran for office as a candidate of a party, but in an entrenched duopoly, the cost, the entry barriers are huge. The cost of politics in Ghana is staggering. Staggering. You would be surprised to hear some of the numbers. Presidential, I don't know what it is now, but some years back, CDD did a survey with Westminster Center for Democracy. Over a decade ago, the numbers were, over $100 million. Right? Now it's probably double. Right? Members of parliament spend, and it's not just for the election, you have to almost take care of your constituents, carry them for 4 years. So basically, it's prohibitive. You can't use that channel to get into office to change anything. Right? So the structural barriers are real. Right? There are these structural barriers. So I think that while Hirschman's formulation, I think, helps us to organize our thinking around these issues, when you put it on the ground and you overlay it on the structure that we have in Ghana, it's very difficult. Then you can understand the low numbers. It's not that, yes, there's some apathy, by all means, right? Especially people who have to fend for themselves. If you go on a protest, Charlie, you come back, there's no water. Water is not flowing. There is doomsday, and you are sweaty. Can't eat. So all of these things, right? So are we then stuck? I don't have an answer to that question, but I think that it is in the long-term sustainable interest of our democracy to unfreeze these parts, especially citizen protest. We must take a very hard look at our attitude towards citizen protest, because the more you prevent young people from venting, when you don't have options for them, the more things bottle up. I think we should allow protest as much as we can, as long as it is orderly. We should allow protest. We should try not to prevent them. The African population is very youthful. They have a lot of energy. Protest should be allowed for young people to vent. We must reform our political parties. The amount of money in our politics is obscene. I used to be against public funding for parties. Now I'm not. But only on condition that when we take it over, we take over everything. We take over billboards. We take over everything. We script it. And it's done in other African countries. I was in Dakar before the elections. Not a single billboard. Because they opened the election window a few weeks before election. Ghana has a 4-year election window. The moment you lose election, your billboard stays because you are waiting to come back. It doesn't go anywhere. Right? So some of these changes have to be done to liberate voice. To liberate voice. Because, as Hirschman says, that is the political action par excellence. And without that, there is no peaceful alternative to changing course in our democracy. Without that. I don't see any peaceful alternative to changing course. Without that and structural reform of a lot of the institutions we have mentioned, we are setting ourselves on a slippery slope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kwesi. Thank you very, very much. With your indulgence, we'll make a very slight but interesting adjustment to our program. Before we call the discussants to come up here with their responses, and Akuno, with your permission, the great organizer, with your permission, a friend of Akoto Ampaw wants to come and give us a poem. We hope it's not a volume of poems. But Mr. Roland Akusa, who is an alumnus of this university and also of University of Pennsylvania, he says he's now an entrepreneur. We wish he could have made money and financed Akoto Ampaw's exploits. But he says he also doubles as an amateur poet. But the more important thing is that 51 years ago, as a teenager, and together with other students, he joined Sheshe and other university students to construct irrigation canals at Dawenya, I believe during the very early months of Colonel Champon's regime. So, Mr. Akosa, we are all ears.
This is Ode to Freedom in memory of the immortal Tony Sheshe. Ode to Freedom in memory of the immortal Tony Sheshe. When a haunting silence befalls our land, as in a graveyard solitude, not with you, my dear friend, not with a stranger, let alone a foe, I dare share in the incandescent light of everyday banter, of everyday gratitude, waxing, waning, in a welcoming warmth of a people unafraid to share. How often I mumble, but to myself, with no one with whom to talk. I seem like a troubled mind who at my own shadow into a smile I beam. You, how often you grumble, but to yourself, with no one with whom to talk. You seem like a muddled mind. When agitated, you shadow box to let off steam. Now, we know his kind of antics, he who forces on us a stern silence. While high on adolescent innocence, we wager when we play at marbles. When a bully overrules a rule, we put up with him in a stoic silence. Still, hit or miss, winning fair and square makes for a good game of marbles. But when might rules the roost, the fabled strong man overrules our choice, as missing the virtues of candor, of valor, of ardor, so upon us imposes his will. Bourgeois vices, says he, so vile, so vain, can't at the pool of a fair choice. But relents when he reckons a legion's indomitable will, wilting his mortal will. Wasn't Asantua the warrior queen seemed as playing marbles while her men played possum when a scoffer made demeaning demands. But her ground she stood, such as we wait out a bully at a game of marbles. So too, by a votive will, a people are to wait the strong man's domineering demands. Now a matriarch bears a creed, no sword of a queen warrior, secular, prosecutorial, magisterial. She holds court to protect kith from kin. She abides the doctrine of wolves, populi wolves day, but no ideologue warrior. Now therefore the glory of our people's compact. We the people have staked a claim to freedom's story. As coups spring to life on a dewy African dawn, we enact, as cause crow, a revitalizing, timeless ritual, our story. Our heralds bear tidings in images as in a mirror held to the face, crooning, owing, eyeing, in cheers, in jeers, in heat, in wind, in rain, in the chill. They beam our people's travails onto our people, into the mind, into the heart, on the face. Still, above the day-long din of shrill voices, lies, freedom stories thrill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Kusa. Now we come to the responses by our two discussants. The first discussant is Professor Georgie Chikata. Professor Georgie Chikata is a distinguished professor of development studies at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London, and an adjunct professor at the Institute of African Studies, this one. Professor Chikata is the immediate past director of this institute, that is where we are holding this anniversary, the Institute of African Studies in the University of Ghana. She has been an active member of the women's movement in Ghana and in Africa since she was a student, and I bear witness to her when I was a little girl with no plaited hair yet, still very active in the movement for democracy and women's rights. So she's quite a pioneer and still looking very youthful. She's a founding member of the Network of Women's Rights in Ghana, NetRight, and also of the Third World Network in Africa. Professor Chikata, we are all ears for you.
Thank you so much, Professor Kakari, for that introduction. I also want to congratulate the Friends of Akoto Ampaw for instituting this lecture. And I noted what the speakers, first speaker said, that we should institutionalize the lecture. I hope Friends of Akoto Ampaw are listening, and I hope that this will happen. I was really grateful when I received the invitation to be discussant, because for me it was an opportunity to reflect on Kwesi Prempeh's lecture, which I knew would basically hit the spot, but also to offer my own perspectives on the civic space and on the life and times of our dear comrade and friend Akoto Ampaw, affectionately known as Sheshe. So this lecture has been wide-ranging. It has discussed the problems of our democratic dispensation. It has shown us very clearly that this model of democracy is suffering from a myriad of problems: economic mismanagement, problematic centralization of power and a distorted local government system, and a failure to address some of the burning issues that we face because of the self-interest of the elites who run the system. Most importantly, I think this lecture has established the importance of engaged citizenship as one of the solutions to the crisis of democracy. Prempe also brought to life in a very beautiful way Akoto Ampaw's example of full-throated and robust citizenship. And for that, I was very grateful. I also noted his critical application of Hirschman's framework on civic engagement. And I particularly was struck by the critical points he made about the ways in which it does not fully apply to our situation. He even went as far as to offer some preliminary solutions to this crisis we have in civic engagement. And I hope that we'll have the chance to hear more of his ideas at another date and engage with them. I, for example, have always thought that civil society should be struggling for proportional representation as a form of government in Ghana, rather than keep this first past the post system. I also think if political parties want to be funded, they must change the way they bring candidates to light. In other systems, we have the list system, which allows for all sorts of disadvantaged and marginalized citizens to participate in our politics and in our elections and to be elected. In South Africa, the fact that we have almost the same number of men and women in the South African parliament is not an accident. It's a direct result of the list system. So there are so many ways in which we can begin to improve our democracy and our civic citizenship. Sheshe came of political age in the 70s, and this was a period of great ferment in Ghana. And although Ghana was under military rule, the level of discontent and disintegration of the economy and society was such that civic activism was at an all-time high. The Professional Bodies Association, the TUC, the Students' Movement were all engaged in the struggle to end dictatorship and economic mismanagement on different fronts. Recognizing that protesting corruption and mismanagement was not enough, a group of leftists and social democrats, including Sheshe, formed a broad progressive movement, the New Democratic Movement, known as the NDM, to chart a course of change and transformation for Ghana. When I first met Sheshe in the early 80s at the University of Ghana, where I was an undergraduate student, he was a student leader, a member of the executive committee of the NDM, the anti-imperialist movement, which had ambitions to work for a national democratic revolution in Ghana. The International Students Movement, the Workers' Movement, and the space created by the 31st December Revolution of the early 80s became terrains on which he and many comrades struggled, alongside popular movements for economic emancipation and social justice for all. When Sheshe was detained for over 2 years, between 1987 and 1989, James Fort became his terrain of struggle. As a young lawyer working as part of the now defunct Ghana Association of Democratic Lawyers, we visited a few prisons to document the situation of young persons who had been held in remand for over long periods. At James Fort, Sheshe presented us with his own list of remand cases he wanted us to take up. The Fourth Republic brought liberal democracy, the politics of patronage, a deepening of neoliberalism, but it also created instability at the heart of the nation, which also affected the civic space. Broad, multifaceted movements lost ground to NGOs with more professionalized and specialized approaches to work in the civil space. As well, members of movements such as the New Democratic Movement adapted to this new terrain of struggle. It has resulted in the proliferation of single-issue politics. It has weakened the ability of civil society to mobilize society as a whole. and to defend their civic space and civic citizenship. In addition to the points that Kwesi Prempeh made about the crisis of the civil space and the factors responsible for it, I want to point out that the crisis of citizenship has also exposed the false promise of liberal democracy. I think Professor Kakari alluded to that when he asked, what are our political parties for? This, together with the rampaging neoliberalism, has circumscribed civil citizenship into an echo chamber in which citizens are allowed to vent frustrations without redress, with the promise that the next 4 years they are going to be able to change government. And even this little space of frustration is fast shrinking, and Prempeh's lecture demonstrates it very clearly. We've seen the rise in state authoritarianism on one hand, but also the rise of conservative and unaccountable non-state actors on the other hand. We are in this complicated situation where citizens groups are under severe attack, but also are perpetrators or bystanders. Take the media, for example. Attacks on media personnel by party political operatives and the coercive arms of the state have become quite rampant and alarming and should be totally condemned and resisted. However, the media has not shied away from joining lynch mobs to manufacture consensus against the LGBT community, one of the most marginalized and stigmatized communities in our civic space. People with opposing views have been subjected to heavily skewed panel discussions, heckling, gotcha tactics in the media, providing ammunition for their harassment by some of the most conservative and authoritarian segments of our society. The media is so busy in this exercise that there has been no serious scrutiny of the unconstitutionality of Parliament's conduct in passing this bill. Another threat to the civic space is the increasing strength and influence of the chieftaincy institutions, which is increasingly dominated by highly educated professionals needing to burnish their achievements with this added layer of power, made even more powerful by its chameleon-like quality. Many Ghanaians have the mistaken belief that this is a cultural institution which embodies what it means to be Ghanaian, and that it also represents the lowest level of development. You often hear people say that chiefs know what's wrong with their communities, and they are best placed, therefore, to make decisions about development. Using this principle of subsidiarity, some have argued that it is the chiefs who know best what their subjects need. This misuse of subsidiarity has fueled calls for a second chamber in our parliament composed of chiefs, as if we already do not have enough trouble in our democracy. While this has not been successful, chiefs have increased their grip on civic life in all sorts of ways, adjudicating conflicts, issuing punishments such as banishment, fines, and other forms of humiliation to anyone who falls foul of nebulous crimes and misdemeanors. So here we are. Citizens are caught between the contradictory status of being both citizens and subjects, with implications for their rights to free speech, freedom of conscience, association, and personhood. This also has ramifications for economic citizenship. Recent land tenure reforms under the LAP have strengthened the power of chiefs over land and weakened the principles of communal land ownership and fiduciary positions of traditional rulers, and turned them into vectors of land grabbing by national elites and transnational corporations. And many of the landless poor now have to rely on share contracts with steep costs that threaten their right to make a decent living and therefore express their economic citizenship. The collusion between the state and the chieftaincy institution to squeeze the civic space can be seen in the current election campaign, and we already heard a lot from our speaker about this. We know that chiefs are not supposed to be involved in partisan politics, but they've been blessing candidates and showing appreciation in all sorts of ways. I believe that women are some of the greatest losers in this alliance among patriarchal forces, the state, non-state institutions, and the family, to circumscribe their citizenship in the name of culture and religion. There are many lessons we can learn from the life and times of Akoto Ampaw. And the lecture made by Prempeh points to one of these, and that's his adaptability and his ability to use different terrains for his lifelong struggle against imperialism and injustice. His activism within the students' movement, within NDM, the workers' movement, in detention, in the courts, and in the NGO world involved different tools, different preoccupations. And it demonstrates the importance of adapting to different terrains, modes, and tools of struggle at our disposal, while being consistent in our commitment to the fight for the most oppressed and marginalized of citizens. The broad range of Akoto Ampaw's lifelong interests is another lesson we can learn. He was interested in the economic fallout of imperialism, the living conditions of the working people, the right to information, keeping the civic spaces open, media freedom, Darfur, Sahrawi Arab Republic, global peace and security. They all point to the power of internationalism and Pan-Africanism, and the importance of avoiding the fragmentation of our struggles, and the value of solidarity in our civic space. His last stand against the anti-LGBTQ coalition is emblematic in this understanding that all struggles involving the most oppressed and marginalized are connected, and they should concern all of us interested in strengthening civic relationships. I was looking at my email records to see what kinds of messages I received from Akoto Ampaw in the last 10 years. I realized that his solidarity with the LGBTQ community did not actually start with the threat of the bill. In response to a message in which someone shared an editorial in Public Agenda, which was titled, "Reject Calls for Homosexual Rights," he wrote, and this was in July 16, 2010. This is really gross and simple. It reflects, I suspect, the Roman Catholic prejudices of the editor, which is paraded around as the time-honored virtues and values of Ghana. If there's one thing we have generally lost as a people, it is our time-honored values and virtues. Everyone fights for himself or herself in the pursuit of material gains. When people start talking about so-called human rights, you know they have no commitment to human rights in general. But it is the call for prosecution of the offense, he puts it in quotes, that is most galling, as it is troubling. Of course, we can expect the religious fundamentalists who are daily threatening to impose their jaundiced views on the rest of us to seize on it and run with it. Questions. So it came to pass 10 years later. In response to another report in the media on Tuesday, 19th July 2011, titled, "The Church Must Love Homosexuals But Hate Homosexuality," in which it was reported that the then Secretary of the Association of Charismatic and Christian Churches, Reverend Gideon Titi Ofe, has said that Christians should love homosexuals but hate the act of homosexuality. Sheshe wrote on 20th July 2011, "This is certainly a more balanced and compassionate approach than the drivel we are being fed in the name of Christianity. Fundamentally, it is based on the recognition of the right of choice. I think we should all find occasion to let our views be heard on this matter." It is not surprising, therefore, that he brought together a group of individuals from the human rights and women's movement to challenge the bill when it was unveiled in 2021. Even though at the start the effort looked like a finger in the dike, it turned a mission that looked like a done deal to impose intolerance, terror, and conservative notions of family on an unsuspecting nation into a serious contest between different visions of democracy in Ghana, which soon broadened to include a respectable range of civil society organizations. Even when he was not on the front lines of a struggle, such as the women's movement of Ghana, he paid attention to our issues and encouraged us, spoke on our platforms, and expressed consistent solidarity with our struggles. Sheshe attended some of the early meetings of the Federation of Ghana Women, an effort led by Techua Menu in the early 80s to organize women in Ghana. I still remember him making the point that we need to understand the basis of women's subordination in society to be able to fight it. He clearly was aware of the fact that one of the preoccupations of the global women's movement in that period was to understand the origins of gender inequalities. Sheshe was also the only one of our comrades who consistently sent us his women comrades greetings every 8th March. Looking at my email record, my almighty email record, I saw about 10 years worth of such greetings, a good habit which he no doubt picked from his days as a leading member of the International Students Movement. And while Sheshe was heroic, courageous, consistent, and undoubtedly one of the most influential leaders of an important strand in left politics in Ghana, for whom leadership was not about amassing possessions for self, friends, and family, I think his biggest strength lay in his recognition of the importance of the collective, his unwavering commitment to organization, and his consistency in nurturing and supporting young cadre to continue to fight for a fairer world. To honor his legacy, I think we need to renew our movements with a new generation of Sheshis who can apply these lessons to strengthening civic citizenship. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgie, for bringing up all of those vital dimensions and also adding to our experiences of Sheshe other aspects of his life as a political, social justice activist. The last discussant is Mr. Suleiman Abraima. Mr. Abraima is the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. He obviously is the youngest among the speakers this morning and may also be the one with not a very long experience in relation to working with or associating with Akoto Ampaw. So, and being a young person, we hope you will also remind us old folks what this democracy is all for young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Chair, and good morning to everyone. I think it is fair to say that when you have the honor of being invited to speak in the midst of 3 distinguished professors, and you happen to be the last person to be called to speak, perhaps it's fine to simply say thank you so much for inviting me and then taking your seat. Or basically saying, with all that said, I have nothing more useful to add. But given the honor and the privilege of being invited, and of course, sitting through this and listening to the very educative presentation by Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, I cannot but say a few things. I would want to start by saying that my last encounter with Uncle Sheshe, as we used to call him, was in relation to a defamation suit that had been filed against the Fourth Estate, which is a project of the Media Foundation for West Africa. And this suit was in London, far away in London, by a pastor who claimed a report titled Darkness in the Lighthouse, how a non-retired bishop got paid over £300,000 ex gratia. And the bishop had sued us saying, well, we had defamed him for the publication and all of that. So I had to call Uncle Sheshe, and I had to call Professor Kakari to find out whether at long last he was using a mobile phone. Because all along I knew he was not someone who was using a phone, and fortunately at that time I could reach him on the phone. So I called him, and then he said, oh, is that so? Can you send me a brief of this case, you know, a non-legal perspective of the case? So we put together something and sent to him. And then he said, "Are you sure these are all the facts?" We said, "Yes." He said, "But how can somebody institute such a foolish case?" But anyway, we have to defend it. So, but it's a difficult one because it's in London, you know. Okay, I'm going to put you in touch with a friend. So send this to him and let's see what happens. Well, to cut a long story short, eventually the matter was settled at the instance of the people who filed the case against us. And in the end, they had to actually bear our legal cost and all of that. So that was my last encounter with Sheshe. And of course, before then, I had the privilege of meeting him on different occasions, the RTI struggles and all of that. So sitting through here, you know, as a young man, I am saying, okay, one day, I mean, everyone will be gone. What would I do so that I would also be remembered the way Sheshe is being remembered? And I think that, for me, that has been the reflection. So back to Professor Prempe's presentation, very educative. And I see it as a complete diagnosis, evaluation, and a prescription for our sick democracy. And a number of things have been raised, including the point he makes about we haven't gotten to a situation of a choiceless duopoly. And many continue to raise this question. Who do I vote for? Oh, I don't like this one, I don't like this one. But if I vote for this one, they won't win. If I choose this, they won't win. And this reminds me of Hassan Ayariga, who is from the Boku area where I come from. And anytime there is a funeral or a gathering of people from that community here in Accra, he uses it as a campaign platform. And he always ends by saying, don't let anyone deceive you that if you vote for me, I won't win. Vote for me to see whether I will win or I will not win. So it's indeed a problematic situation where if you listen to the campaign now, perhaps you would hear more sounds and more music than policies that are being put out, and a lot more promises here and there. Indeed, that is why if you take the biggest problem of Galamsey, which is destroying our environment, destroying our future, both parties are shying away from touching on it. As he said, it's about we don't want to lose votes. And I have friends on both sides who say, what can 3 months do? We are left with just 3 months. You know, how can they destroy the whole thing? After 3 months, after election, we'll make sure everything is restored. Do you know there are about close to 2 million people involved in Galamsey? And I should say it and lose the vote. So I think it's great that Prof. Prempe brings that up. Then, of course, the point about active citizenship and the issue of voice. And he makes the point about at some point we feel there is voice, but of course the opportunistic use of the voice, where you listen to radio and it's not about the policies that are being analyzed, but just basically about this is our party and whatever about it is good. That's not our party and whatever about it is a bad thing. And it's quite a difficult situation. For example, at the Media Foundation, every election period we do monitor, you know, commentary in the media, how people are using language and so on and so forth. And we've gotten to a point where the people you name and shame are proud to use your report as their claim to fame. To basically say, look, we are the people fighting for our party, and look, our names are out there. You know, people like Mugabe on Power FM would highlight it and say, oh, the previous one, they said I was number 1, now I'm number 3, you know, and Wuntumi has taken over. So it's an interesting thing. I think that's where we've gotten to where, even though we have a multiplicity of media organizations, it's not about the issues, it's about, you know, insult, attacks, and what people think can help them gain traction within their media ecosystem, within the politics of our country. Then, of course, I work in the media sector, and the media aspects around the media came up. Right now, we have over 700 radio frequencies that have been issued by the NCA, out of which about 600 radio stations are active, more than 100 television channels are active, and of course there are, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, of social media platforms that are being used for broadcast, of political sentiments and all of that. I think that the most unfortunate thing is that we've done this over the years since 1994 without any regulation. There's really no regulation to deal with the broadcast sector. And the NMC, the NCA, so far, I think the NMC will basically say, well, there's little that we can do within the space. And the broadcasting bill, the processes have been in the works since, the last 2 decades, almost 30 years. And yet frequencies are being given away. I believe that one of the fundamental reasons why FM stations, their coverage had to be reduced to 40-kilometer radius was essentially to be able to get more frequencies to continue the parceling out. So that's another issue that we have to deal with. But what was quite intriguing for me was the issue of trust and how that, as Prof said, may be the reason why people may not be that much active. In other words, if you look at the Afrobarometer data, it shows that trust in Parliament, very low, as Prof said, in the judiciary, getting lower. The presidency, I think, is even the highest in terms of the drop, the police, and all of that. And one would have assumed that if people don't trust the system, then what to do is to maybe begin to react and to act against the system so that you assert yourself and get what is needed. But quite strangely, that appears to be a reason why people are perhaps less active. And then the point about different experiences among different people in terms of the quality of governance and the dividends of governance that was brought up. And it reminded me about a situation in one of the constituencies in the country where there is an ongoing rehabilitation of, roads within the community, gutters, culverts being built, and so on. And they've chosen to do that predominantly in the area that they feel they have the major support from. Now, the tipper trucks that are working on these construction have to move out and go and get, the soil for the filling and all of that. And then yesterday, somebody calls me to say, well, the areas where the sand and so on are being fetched, the people are saying they won't allow the tipper trucks to come and fetch them because they are not beneficiaries of the construction. And already they were protesting. Now, why are the things being concentrated in a particular area and we are not benefiting? You speak to the people and they say, well, even if we do it for them, they won't vote for us. So we want to consolidate, our votes in the area. So that's certainly another critical issue. And then, of course, Prof highlights the point about the literal collapse of our local governance system. Now we have DCEs, but they will tell you, look, even KVIPs are being awarded from Accra. Even motorbikes for, a few people will be awarded from the ministry in Accra, and then it will be delivered to you, but it will be registered as part of your common fund. So when you look at your common fund allocation, you will see it there, but it's already been utilized to procure certain things for you. So I think the presentation, of course, raises a number of issues for us to ponder about. The redefinition of our democracy, I think that's quite interesting. Government for the party, of the party, and by the party, instead of, of the people, for the people, and by the people. And that's the reality. That's where we are now. It's about the the partisans. If MPP is there, the beneficiaries to a large extent are the folks who are within. And that is why, for example, you look at the National Service, the Scholarship Secretariat, and you look at the beneficiaries. Party chairman, the children and relatives of party chairmen, MPs, ministers, and all of that. Then when it is revealed, they say, oh, why? Are they not Ghanaians? Well, but the mechanism is established to benefit needy but brilliant people. But you have somebody who got 3.97 GPA, first class, wanted 4,000, to pay part of his MPhil fees, and was denied. And yet somebody who got a pass has $30,000 to do a master's outside the country. And then you look into it, and it is the son of a regional chairman of the party. Somebody who is, able to buy 300 and something vehicles for the party, has the daughter, getting scholarship to pursue further studies. So, I mean, this is a clear illustration of the point that Prof makes about, who benefits from the duopoly that we are in. I think as I was listening, three things came up. The issues of our institutions of democracy, the judiciary, parliament, the executive, the police, and the NCCE, for example. It is the least funded institution in our country, and perhaps the most important, if you look at the constitutional responsibilities for the NCCE. But even towards elections, they are struggling. I remember during COVID, a lot of people were saying, oh, what is the NCCE doing? What is the NCCE doing? Then if you speak to them, they will tell you, all our buses, all our cars are broken down. Eventually, they got certain cars allocated to them from the Jubilee House, and after COVID, all those cars were retrieved. I think we need to begin to talk about these critical institutions and the role that they have to play. The other thing, of course, is money. And now money is everything. If you are not positioning yourself in a way to be able to make money, then perhaps you are living in a different country and all of that. But central to all this, I believe, is the whole question of values. As a country, where lies our values? Do we really have values now? And I think without that, it will be difficult to really deal with the challenges that we face. But Prof, of course, ended by saying that, well, he doesn't have solutions, but I think he prescribed quite a few. The first that I want to highlight, the point about allowing citizens to express themselves. And increasingly, if you look at the press freedom rankings and all of that, we are going down, even though people dispute it. Oh, it's not real. They've changed the methodology. That was the narrative from our government people. It's because they've changed their methodology. They've changed it from the previous one. And I said, did they change it only for Ghana? If they changed it globally and other countries are doing well, why do you think that you are a victim of the new methodology? The reality is that freedom of expression is certainly not as it used to be. And I think it is important that, as Prof highlighted, we do that. The reform to political parties, I don't know how we're going to do it though. It's a major thing that has to happen, but I don't know if it is possible. Because the structures and the mechanisms that have been put in place is essentially to benefit those who are there. And I don't know if those changes would happen. Reducing monetization in politics. Again, I don't know how we can get that done. And then, of course, the issues about the structural reforms to our institution. Now, to end, I just want to say that, in my view, perhaps we started a project called Democracy, a democracy project in 1992. But we did so with a project document that was essentially intended to protect and benefit those who were in power then. And we did so with a document that did not have anything about results metrics, anything about indicators of results, anything about monitoring and evaluation, anything that will guide us to know whether we are making progress or not making progress. And we didn't have anything in there in terms of sustainability. And it appears, even though there was no time frame for this project, it seems to me that if we are not careful, the time for that project to end perhaps is quite close. And therefore, we need to reevaluate the document. That is why people talk about the need to look at the Constitution again, which for me is a project document. The need for us to begin to look at it. And as those who did the review suggested, to move it from a political constitution to a development constitution that benefits everyone. Without that, I believe maybe we'll continue to see a deterioration rather than an improvement of the situation that we find ourselves in. So once again, thank you very much, Prof, for the very erudite presentation and the education. and I'm grateful for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sule. Akunu, can we get some chairs here? No, 3 chairs there from. Oh, here, the ones here. But I have only 1 chair. I don't have 2 chairs. The person Mubaha. And the person Mubaha. Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Whilst we are getting the stage here ready, please, can you stand up and just stretch for a few seconds? You know, all of us, we've been sitting down for a while, and if you can, just get up and stretch your back. Okay, let's please take your seats again.
Let me take that one today.
Ago, please take your seats again. Please take your seats again for the general discussion, please. Please take your seats again. Hello. Hello, take your seats again. Please take your seats again. Can I mention names? Audrey. Audrey Techua, please take your seats. Techua no ma here sao. Oh, say no open commodity. Now open commodity now see me move here. What could be done? What really can we do to straighten things up, to improve the situation? And that's, well, one of the reasons we are here, to contribute to enlightening ourselves and to see if we can begin to reflect on how to improve our democracy. I think it was Karl Marx who said at one point that the philosophers have interpreted the world. What is left is to change it. All the time, we talk a lot, we discuss a lot. What can we do to change things? We hope this general discussion that you are all going to be involved in will help us understand the situation even more and better, and hopefully we can also come up with some ideas. I think, as the speakers emphasized, Akoto Ampaw's life included, of course, serious intellectual understanding of things, but above all, his activism, I think, was primed on organization. He was always involved in activities that were fostered by organization. He had no qualms about coalition building, bringing different people from different sectors together to pursue causes. And I think that without organization, we can wail, moan, cry, whatever, we are not going to make much progress. So, friends, ladies and gentlemen, this is the time for all of us to discuss.
All right, so there you've been watching the very first of the yearly lectures as by the friends of Akoto Ampaw. Anthony Akoto Ampaw, of course, a legend in the legal fraternity of Ghana. And this lecture has been, the keynote speaker was Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, and you heard also Professor Kakari as well there, and Suleimana Brahima, as well as Prof. Joji as well there, Joji Chikata speaking there as well. So you'll be watching this lecture, and keep watching Channel 1 TV.
Over 5 million children have benefited from free SHS. Protect free SHS. Vote Dr. Baumia #1 on the ballot.
Facility Pro Management Services Limited, the most outstanding facility management company in Africa. We have over 12 years experience in professional facility management services such as cleaning, fumigation, and pest control to landscaping, post-construction cleanings, and electronic security installations. With highly trained personnel, exceptional customer service, and operations in all 16 regions of Ghana,